corporations understand that not every legal battle is going to make it to the Supreme Court. In fact, most cases won't even make it to federal court at all. That's why corporate dark money is starting to flood local judicial racers. I have Farron Cousins with me with the Trial Lawyer magazine to talk about this. This is a story you've been covering a long time. Yeah. If I think back how long we have been trying to warn everybody, all that's happening, what happens with voters is it's the shiny things. The president's race, the Senate race, maybe I don't know, they pay more attention to local county commissioners than they pay where it comes to local state court judges. And we're getting killed as consumers in state courts, aren't we?
Absolutely, and that's what voters don't seem to understand. Most judicial races in this country are considered nonpartisan, which means when you go vote for the judge, there's not going to be an R or a D next to the person's name. It's just the judge's name. You vote for him. Maybe you've seen some commercials. But what people don't understand is that there is a lot of money. It might be a town of 2,000 people, but that judge has probably taken in tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars from massive corporate interests. And you pointed out, I've been talking about this for a long time. It's every 2 years I have to do another story on this to talk about all the money flowing into these judicial elections.
Let me put it in perspective. Okay, let's just take, for example, let's take Wisconsin. What a nightmare! I mean, it's a nightmare up there. Yeah. So you have Governor Scott Walker, dope of all dopes. He is able now to put in place the judges, the state court judges that helped him get elected. That's what's happening. For example, he has one judge that actually raised all the money for him to be elected as governor in the campaign. Now, here's what's really interesting. So Walker then appoints the judge, and now this particular judge is hearing all of these cases that are being generated by the very people who gave him money, the big corporations, the special interests, rather than saying, I can't get involved. I raised money with these people. No, these judges are jumping right into it. And that's what everybody's missing. Even this article talked about kind of the warm and fuzzy social issues, right. LGBT and, the bathroom bills. I don't know why writers talking about this topic always fall on those issues, LGBT, bathroom issues, gender issues, when you rather than talking about dinner table issues that affect consumers. That's where these judges are killing us.
Absolutely. And what we've seen, the reason they target these, smaller cities, states, whatever it is, the local courthouse judge, the reason they go after these people is because those are the people who make the decisions that are directly going to affect the corporation in that area. Say you have a town like Denton, Texas, that you remember a few years ago, they passed the resolution to ban fracking. Well, suddenly after they did that, you had all of this fossil fuel money coming into this tiny little Texas town to elect county commissioners, into the judicial races, because they wanted to overturn this. The Koch brothers specifically target school boards in places like Ohio and the Dakotas. And they do it because all politics is local. And if they can get, a county commissioner to go along with their plans for a new fracking well, or a local judge to rule that, yes, you can frack here, that's all they need. You can spend $10,000 on that small campaign versus $10 million on a federal campaign.
So let me go back to this note that we talk about all the time. People have to understand that these state court judges affect the environment, they affect wage and hour, they affect every aspect of what I call the dinner table issues. That's mom and pop talking about, we don't have enough money to pay our mortgage. We don't have enough money to pay the rent. We can't afford food. Instead, these writers, I don't know why this infuriates me so, but this is Truth Out, for example, and she did a good job talking about the article, but they always return to these social issues, as if the social issues is what mom and pop cares about. Mom and pop could not care less whether there's something called a bathroom bill. You understand what I'm saying?
No.
Mom and pop care that this local judge can shut down a union, that this local judge can destroy the environment, that the local judge can affect wage and hour issues. I mean, that's really what this is all about. So,
Well, and also that the local judge could side with the corporation, and say, okay, we're going to give up this plot of land to the corporation. Yes, it's right next to a school and a community center, but they really want to drill for oil right here. They want to pump their fracking fluids into this ground next to the school, and I'm going to let them do that.
Yeah. But instead, the writers truth out. Again, kudos to this woman who did this article. But again, she goes the same place that all of these progressive writers go. What about the social? Yeah, these social issues are a problem. But what mom and pop care about when you talk about issues like this, how does this affect me? Not how does it affect a bathroom bill? And I think until they start understanding it, it's like they never connect. It never connects to the American public at all. A federal judge who once ruled that the Alabama prison system has, quote, tremendously inadequate mental health care is now going to decide if the state's doing enough to prevent inmate suicides.
Yes.
Another Alabama
It
story.
shocks you, doesn't it?
Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana.
They're so big on civil rights, Pap. It's shocking.
So what's the central issue in this case, Molly?
Well, this is actually an ongoing problem for some time. This suit was brought by the Southern Poverty Law Center. I always have to look down for that one, Southern Poverty Law Center. So they've brought this several years ago. They've amended it because of this recent spike in suicides. 15 inmates have killed themselves in 15 months. Attorneys for these inmates are saying that this is unacceptable, that there are basically a number of reasons that these inmates are committing suicide that can be impacted by the correction system, that the majority of these are happening. In fact, the Southern Poverty and Law Center says that Alabama has the highest number of suicides within the prison system, and a good number of them are happening when they're in solitary confinement. So that's essentially what this lawsuit is about. This same judge that heard similar allegations in a similar suit a couple of years ago and said that health care being provided through the correction system was, horrendous and a problem, is now hearing this same case where the protocol of determining basically is Alabama doing enough to prevent these suicides? What prevention measures do they have in place? What needs to be changed? What can be changed?
Okay, so look. Part of this story as we go forward, we're going to find that the private prison industry is having part of this problem.
$8 million the state already wants to borrow to build new prisons. That's
Correct.
Exactly where it's going.
Okay, so what is the response from Alabama prison officials? How do they say, yeah, we had 15 suicides, but these are people in prison, things happen. What's the response? Because I remember the last time this came up,
right,
there was a similar kind of problem. Alabama says, it's just endemic in the system that if you look all over the country, everybody has these problems. Everybody doesn't have these problems.
That's exactly right. Well, they're trying to say, hey, these inmates aren't dying because we don't care. We do care. We just need to tighten up our measures and our protocol and make some changes. And we do want to do a better job of effectively identifying potential suicidal inmates. And we're going to make some changes. So they've come up with their own plan and response that basically says, we really do have heart. We do care about the safety of our inmates. We're not going to send them straight from mental health observation to solitary confinement. We'll stop that practice. So that's what is coming out in this hearing this week, is that all this testimony, especially from attorneys that represented clients who did commit suicide, telling these horror stories of how essentially there were plenty of warning signs and corrections officers within the system are not doing anything about it. So they're saying, at the very least, hold your people accountable when they're not even following basic procedures when it comes to following mental health rules.
Well, part of the problem, I read some similar stories that you're talking about here. Part of the problem is a lot of the prisoners have bad drug problems.
Absolutely.
Okay?
They've already got issues.
They've got issues. They're thrown into in solitary confinement. There's really no effort to help them make it through the drug addiction problem. So it's like throwing gasoline on a fire and all of a sudden they're committing suicide. There's ways to deal with this. The point is there are other prison systems all over the country that have those same problems.
Yes.
But they have stop gaps in between. They say, okay, this person's coming in for a lifetime heroin addiction. How do we deal with that? What do we do? And they just make it at least reasonably humane to where they can make it through the system. They don't throw them in solitary confinement and say, well, bad things happen to prisoners. What's the judge's reaction so far to this process?
Well, it does give me a little bit of hope. This is Federal Judge Myron Thompson. Like I said, he heard this similar allegations a couple of years ago, and he's saying already, well, this sure sounds a lot like what I've already heard, and seems to be wanting to perhaps go down the path of some sort of accountability where we see some real changes, because they were already supposed to be implementing some of these changes. And yet, based on the fact that you have a wave of suicides, another spike, 15 in 15 months, he's saying this sure sounds similar to the last time we heard these allegations. In fact, when they addressed him 2 years ago, an inmate who testified during that trial later committed suicide after he testified. So this judge is saying, look, how many times do we have to get people on the stand saying you've got problems, and yet the same thing keeps coming up?
The point being, they've looked at it very closely. This is not speculation. They compared what's happening in Alabama to what's happening in the rest of the country. And Alabama is way on the fringe.
And you're right. It boils down to we need reform, reentry reform, identifying them when they're in there, giving them the proper skills and tools to deal with it, not building more prisons.
Thank you for joining me. We'll, by the way, next week we're going to be talking about private prison systems. This is a big story there, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, Pat.
This is an important message for our nation's veterans. If you served our country in the military between 2003 and 2015 and you suffered significant hearing loss, you might be entitled to compensation, because the hearing protection you were issued may be at fault for the damage you suffered, but you need to act now. Your time to make a claim might be limited. Learn more at levinlaw.com/earplugs.